Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here today. In the next couple hours, we will talk about cooperation among fact checkers, why it is so important, and what we can do to improve it. Personally, I think that the need that we have in the fact-checking field of the help of colleagues from other countries is not only one of the most interesting aspects of our work, but also one of the most beautiful, one that allows us to write the most interesting fact-checking articles. Let me give you some examples. Sometimes we see at the national level only a small part of a bigger disinformation story that is circulating and mutating all across Europe, if not across the world. So in situations like these, we need our colleagues to put together the pieces and have the bigger picture. For example, I remember this story from back 2018 about MasterCard and Soros giving credit cards to migrants to invade the European Union. The story arrived in this form in Italy, and I think also in Spain and France, maybe, and also in the European Parliament, where an Italian MIP made an interrogation about it. So with the help of our foreign colleagues, we discovered how this story was born in the Balkans, actually, exploiting which small parts of true information and how it gained false details and twists, and most of all, how it grew at each passage from some obscure Slovenian website filled with hoaxes till arriving in national media and then in the European Parliament. And this is just one example, but cross-national cases of disinformation, even though it is probably one of the most interesting cases, it's not the only example possible for the importance of international cooperation among fact-checkers. Another one that is quite often is when we hear national politicians talking about what is happening in other countries. Something good, something bad. For example, in Italy, recently we had politicians talking a lot about what is going on in Spain with migrants, or in the Netherlands about corporate taxation. 1 year ago, we checked a statement made by an Italian politician about a comparison between Hungary and Sweden in the management of the pandemic. The Italian politician claimed that a law passed in Sweden by the leftist government gave the government full powers in the same way that a Hungarian law gave them to Orban, always during the pandemic, of course. So we checked the statement of the Italian politician and it was false, but to do so, we needed the help of colleagues, both from Sweden and Hungary. And without them, probably we wouldn't been able to check this statement. We wouldn't have the means to do so. So in general, I can say that to know if something happening abroad is true, especially if the topic is complex and we need the details, the help of our colleagues from that country is of paramount importance to find the right documents, sources, links, etc. So I could go on with other examples, of course, but I'm sure that today's speaker will give you plenty, and I don't want to spoil anything. So these cooperations are a thing that in the fact-checking community is already doing, but we hope with the EDMO project to do them even better. EDMO, as you probably already know, given that we are in the EDMO week, is the European Digital Media Observatory. It was launched in June 2020 with the aim of bringing together fact-checkers, media literacy experts, and academic researchers to understand and analyze this information, also with the cooperation of traditional media, online platforms, and of course, media literacy experts. So within EDMO, we plan to create a close-knit network of fact-checking organizations to promote this kind of cooperation, whom I just gave some examples of, in a more efficient and faster way. But this is just one of our goals. We really want to have also a stronger impact on disinformation. And I think that one way is, of course, to unite our forces and voices to cooperate more with traditional media, researchers, social media networks, and other actors to gain visibility, so that in the future we will have the means together to have a stronger impact on the public opinion, and so make the public opinion aware of huge cases of disinformation circulating. But EDMO is the future, and I'm sure we are all going to hear a lot about it during this week. For now, we can maybe focus a little bit on the past to understand how we arrived here, what we have learned, and what positive experiences we can bring with us in the future for the next steps. So after this short introduction, I will give the floor to Laura Loguercio, a brilliant fact checker at Pagella Politica, and she will talk about some interesting cooperative investigation that we conducted under the previous European project we were part of, SOMA, the Social Observatory for Disinformation and Social Media Analysis. SOMA paved the way for EDMO in many ways. The project had some weaknesses. Naturally, it was the first attempt. So, for example, in my personal opinion, the network of organization involved in the project was very big, but maybe not enough proactive. And this is something that we are fixing, or at least hoping to fix in EDMO. But SOMA was of great importance in starting the process of building a European network of fact-checking organization with the aim of fighting disinformation at a higher level with international cooperative investigations. So I hope and I believe that EDMO will carry the torch, if I can say so, in the next years, fixing the problems that SOMA had, but with the same commitment in creating something that is meant to last. So the need for a stronger and more structured cooperation was already clear to many in the past years, but I think that the pandemic made it even more evident. In SOMA, for example, we saw a huge surge of international cooperations among fact-checkers during 2020. The reasons are many, but I think it's safe to say that disinformation followed the waves of the pandemic. So the countries hit first by the virus were often hit first also by some false news about the virus. So the work of the fact-checkers from that country could be of help for the colleagues from country hit immediately after. And a similar pattern was followed by disinformation revolving around vaccines, of course. So in this historical period where we are facing a huge common enemy that created common problems and common foes, I think it was more clear than ever that we needed to stand together. About this, after Laura's speech about SOMA, we will hear from other experienced fact-checkers, examples and thoughts about the cooperation during the pandemic. We will have Clara Jiménez Cruz from the Spanish fact-checking organization Maldita, Alice Echtermann from the German fact-checking organization Correctiv, Thanos Sitistas from the Greek fact-checking organization Ellinika Hoaxes, and Eva Wackenreiter from the Austrian fact-checking organization Fact is Fact, and currently working as a fact-checker for AFP. After their presentation, there will be time for a discussion, and of course, we are very interested in gathering your impression and ideas, so please don't be shy. So I think I've talked enough. I hope you'll find this session interesting and you'll participate in the discussion. Thank you again, and I leave the floor to Laura Loguercio.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you, Tommaso, for your introduction. I'm Laura Loguercio. I'm a fact checker at Pagella Politica. And I'm going to present 3 examples of collaborative investigations that we have conducted with the help and collaboration of the SOMA network. So during the last couple of months, we worked on several analyses together with members and partners of the network. And as Tommaso said, unfortunately, we had to step up our efforts in order to contrast the growing wave of disinformation that came along with the COVID-19 pandemic. And we all heard for sure and read on social media, and sometimes I have to say also on official news media, about conspiratory theories and hoaxes that follow very closely the developments of the pandemic. And many times they evolve together with official information. So this strict synergy between what is real and what was actually happening against what was invented or at least presented a distorted view of reality. This all contributed to the spread of confusion among the general public and made it much more difficult for people maybe with low levels of media literacy to understand what was confirmed and what came from reliable sources and what was instead made up or at least twisted reality, which was already crazy enough. So in this context, you may guess that one of the main collaborative investigations that we worked on was necessarily focused on the disinformation that circulated and actually still spreading about COVID-19 and vaccines. So this is the first investigation that I'm going to present. And this was published on the SOMA website on December 31st, so just at the end of 2020. And after a few days after the European Medicine Agency approved the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for emergency use. So the investigation is called Disinformation about COVID-19 and Vaccines, A Journey Through Europe, and is this one. Oh no, sorry, this is another one, but we did. Let me take the correct one, which was a bit earlier than that. Here it is. Okay. So this work was led by Pagella Politica and involved several SOMA members from different European countries. More in detail, we had the participation of Globogramma from Spain, the Institute for Future Media and Communication at the University of Dublin, so in Ireland, Eva Intelligence, which is a company that focuses on artificial intelligence in Germany. We also had the help of Debunk.eu from Lithuania, Le Surligneur in France, and FactCheck Vlaanderen in Belgium. So you can understand that this was quite a comprehensive analysis that allowed us to frame the European landscape of what was happening with disinformation about COVID-19 and vaccines, which is something that we couldn't have done alone without the help of all these partners from different countries. So we decided to start this analysis because we noticed that as the scientific community was getting closer and closer to reaching a vaccine that could immunize the world against COVID and eventually get us out of this pandemic. So at the same time as the scientific community was doing all this research, disinformation about the sensitive topic of vaccines was also growing, as I said, with the synergy between what was real and what was not. And new conspiracy theories were being spread that could potentially jeopardize all the work that was being done and discourage people from getting vaccinated. In fact, we know that the problem of vaccine hesitancy is starting to emerge more and more in developed countries, such as, for example, the United States, which did a very good job of in the first phases of the vaccination campaign, but now reached kind of a plateau where people that want to get the vaccine have already got it. And now the challenge is really to convince people that do not want to get vaccinated to actually get the shot. And I'm sure that all this disinformation and conspiracy theories that were circulating did help the growth of this hesitancy with regard to vaccine. So we noticed that these theories were circulating in Italy, but we figured that the phenomenon had all it takes to be much larger than that, of course, because of the scale of the pandemic, which by its own definition is a global phenomenon, but also the scale of the vaccination campaign that was about to begin. And so we wanted to see whether the same false information that was circulating in Italy was also being spread beyond our borders in Europe. And on the other hand, if that wasn't the case, we wanted to know what kind of disinformation were other countries dealing with and experiencing. So we started the investigation by sending out an email to the SOMA network, asking everyone to contribute and to share the false news and the false information that they saw around, maybe during their job or anywhere read about them on social media. And simultaneously, we also opened a Truly Media collection to gather all the relevant materials and to understand what kind of material we had for this investigation and what was circulating in the different countries. And so when we analyzed that and we aggregated all the different oxys that were circulating, and we noticed that actually false information was spreading in very similar ways all across Europe. So the same news that we were seeing in Italy, we found them in many other European countries. And we divided the main false narratives that were circulating about COVID-19 and vaccines into 4 groups, which you can see. So the first group is claims that vaccines haven't been tested enough. And of course, this refers to the record times with which pharmaceutical companies develop the vaccines. And this was immediately exploited by conspiracy theories to say that then the vaccines are not safe, we don't have enough data to trust them. But we know that this was actually due to the unprecedented levels of support that these companies received. They received really high donations from governments or from private donors, because we all wanted to get out of the pandemic. So this is the reason why they were developed in such speedy times. Then the second category that we noticed were circulating a lot is also the false news, or anyway, like the false information that people who took the vaccine are now dead. And this generally refer to the first people who received the vaccine. So we are talking about, for example, people who took part in the trials, so in the first stages of the clinical trials, or the healthcare workers, which of course, and rightly so, were the first one to receive the vaccine. And for example, for this, you might remember the name of Tiffany Dover. She's a nurse from Tennessee, and she fainted during a press conference after receiving the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. And so the video where she faints immediately became viral on social media and was exploited to spread the false information that basically she died or she suffered from these very severe side effects. This circulated in many European countries. We saw it in Italy, but was very well spread in Europe and beyond. And however, which was not true. I mean, the video was true, but Tiffany Dover is now doing fine. After that, the third group that we identified claims that is related to that, and claims that vaccines often have severe side effects. And here we have kind of 2 subgroups of false information that were circulating. The first one tends to exaggerate the normal and natural side effects that vaccine can have. In fact, we all know that this kind of vaccines, but also for other diseases, can bring some mild side effects, such as headaches or sore muscle, but they are natural and they tend to go away in a couple of days. But at the same time, this was immediately exploited by conspiracy theories to exaggerate them and to claim that vaccine can very often have this deadly or at least very severe side effects. And on the other hand, we also saw another narrative which basically invented consequences of vaccines, such as female infertility or a very rare kind of Fales palsy, which was not true, or at least was absolutely not as common as this kind of false news wanted us to believe. And then the last false narrative, which was also very popular in all the European countries that contributed to the analysis, and anyways in many, many countries in Europe, claimed that the COVID-19 vaccines can modify our DNA. And of course, it goes without saying that this is completely unfounded and is not supported by any kind of evidence. On the other hand, sometimes conspiracy theories exploited as a starting point for building this kind of narrative. They exploited the fact that the first 2 vaccines to be approved, which are the one developed by Pfizer and Moderna, they use this new technology, which was actually never used before for vaccines authorized for use on such a large scale. So they said, oh, this is a new technology. We don't know what it's going to do. They will implant whatever, a microchip. But again, this is not true, and this is completely safe. But again, we see how true information and false information often go hand in hand. And so these were the four false narratives that we identified all across Europe about COVID-19 and vaccines. With this investigation, and thanks to the collaboration that we had with several SOMA members, we saw that this information about COVID-19 and vaccines was actually circulating in very similar ways all across Europe, even though sometimes maybe different countries were slightly modifying the false news, maybe to adapt them to their specific cities or like to name specific hospitals, for example. But anyways, this false narrative circulated in many European countries, and this was very interesting to notice, and the job was made much easier and much more precise with the help of all the members and partners that collaborated with us. So I'm going to move on to the second investigation, which is, give me 1 second. Here it is. Okay. The second investigation, we developed this before the start of the vaccination campaign. So we are back in November 2020 when much of the world was dealing with lockdowns or other kinds of restrictive measures, of course, aimed at stopping or at least slowing down the spread of the virus. And so this analysis is called 3 common threats that link anti-lockdown protests in Europe, and it involved us as FACTA and Pagella Politica, and we collaborated with the Prague Security Institute in Czech Republic, with the Institute of Information Security in Ukraine, NTC Center in Bulgaria, and the fact-checking organization Fakta Bari from Finland, which are, of course, all members of the SOMA network. And we also researched and included information from other countries such as Spain, Germany, and the United Kingdom, again, to deliver a comprehensive landscape of the European situation. So this investigation, as I said, was published in early November 2020, when Italy was dealing with several protests that were organized by people that opposed or wanted to manifest their dissent with regards to all these kind of restrictive measures that I talked about. And these protests were really particular because they were focused on this kind of measures, which of course we have never seen before. And so we wanted to know, first of all, whether other European countries were also experiencing similar protests as the ones we were seeing in Italy, since unfortunately the lockdowns were active in several other places. And then we also wanted to know which were the main reasons that drove people to take to the streets and to do all this kind of protests in those times. So as you can tell, this was kind of a broader investigation, which did not focus exclusively on fact-checking, but aimed at analyzing a social phenomenon, which we assume could have a European scale. And at the same time, as we will see in a second, also deals with the problem of disinformation in a different way and from a much broader perspective. So in order to conduct the investigation, we use kind of the same method we used for the previous one. So Pagella Politica got in touch with all members of the SOMA network through the common mailing list that we have, that I have to say proved to be really useful. And we also created a collection on Truly Media where users could upload content and useful links and that's relevant materials that could help us in understanding this phenomenon in Europe. And so we actually discovered that in October and early November, this kind of anti-lockdown protest took place in major cities in a number of countries, such as we found Italy, Spain, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Czech Republic. In this case, we were able to identify 3 main common threats, as you can read in the title, which were all eventually interconnected. So the first one was the eruption of violence. Unfortunately, often these kind of protests ended up in episodes of violence. For example, we saw broken shop windows in Italy, or like trash being set on fire. We had clashes with the police, and sometimes also resulted in a number of arrests. And this is immediately strictly interconnected to the second common thread, which is that these anti-lockdown protests were infiltrated by extremist forces and were supported by this kind of extremist forces from all parts of the political spectrum. And it is this violent minority that generally led to the clashes or to the episodes of violence. And here I think it's important, as a side note, to highlight that the violent part was a minority, as I said, if compared to all the people who took part in the protest. Because of course people can have like legitimate reasons for going against lockdowns or like not wanting the government to put limitation on their freedom of movement. But anyway, we noticed that these two threats, so the eruption of violence and the presence of extremist forces. And then the third interesting point that we noticed is more strictly related to disinformation. And we found that, here it is, we found that actually in several countries, this kind of protests were supported by people who tend to believe to all the conspiracy theories and the hoaxes that were circulating. So we saw like QAnon believers, or people that are against vaccines, and people that are against masks, conspiracy theories that might quote like the damages caused by the 5G technology, and so on. Of course, we all saw during the pandemic this group of people that got organized to claim that COVID didn't exist, that was all kind of a scam organized by the world elites to control us, and also the lockdown were just measures imposed to control citizens, and so on. And with this investigation, it was interesting to notice and to obtain confirmation that these wrong beliefs and these conspiracy theories that we might all deal with on, like we might work on them on our laptops, or we might read about on mobile phones, and so on. It was interesting to see that during the pandemic, they actually ended up being real movements with people that like took to the street and participated in this kind of protest, not only in Italy, but in several European countries. And on the other hand, the collaboration with the network allowed us to frame the situation from an international perspective and to develop a clear landscape of where the protests were taking place and which were their main elements. Of course, as a note, I also want to say that even though these kind of protests were quite common in Europe, some SOMA members told us that their countries were not dealing with this kind of events. And that's the case, for example, of Finland and Bulgaria. So of course, again, the help of the of members and partners of the SOMA network helped us understand what was happening way beyond our borders. But anyway, we saw that the situation was quite similar. I'm going to go to the third analysis. Let me find it on the website. This one. Okay, so this third analysis is is again different from both the first and the second one, and it's kind of an example of a one-on-one collaboration that was conducted within the SOMA network, and this one involved us as Pagella Politica and Facta, and the Bulgarian project De Facto, which is of course part of the network. So in this case, the idea of collaborating began actually with a call with an event which was organized last summer with the SOMA network in order to present the main tools offered by SOMA. And after that, we got in touch with De Facto and we started developing this project, which is called Why Do We Believe in Fake News? A Journey Through the Cognitive Layers of Disinformation. So I chose this one as the last investigation to present because I believe it's a good example of an individual, like as I said, a one-on-one collaboration and a working relationship that was born within the SOMA network and was aimed at the development of kind of a long-term project. In fact, this article with on and off moments took several months to eventually be published on the website of the SOMA Observatory. So in the analysis, we wanted to present the scientific framework that was developed by researchers at De Facto, and that explores why, on a cognitive level, people tend or do not tend to believe in disinformation. So here again, we see another way of talking about disinformation from a very wide perspective, and because de facto use neuroscience to identify the 4 cognitive mechanisms that lead people to believe or to question a particular kind of information when they get in touch with it. So we're talking about when we see an information online, why do a false information online, why do some people believe that? And on the other hand, why do some people discharge that as unreliable or completely false? So de facto developed this scientific framework made of 4 cognitive mechanisms. And I'm not going to touch upon all of them because, of course, each one would deserve an in-depth explanation. But I'm just going to make one example that I found particularly interesting and also extremely relatable to the job of fact-checking that we do every day. And this mechanism is called systemic causality. So this is the opposite of direct causality. Wait, let me get it here. Okay, this is the opposite of what we generally call direct causality, and which is the mechanism that we use to learn new things since we are born. Basically, we tend to relate two phenomena that we experience directly one after the other. For example, if I touch the fire, I know that I'm going to get burned, or if I turn a key into a lock, I know that the door is going to open, and all these kind of direct correlations that we can have. But however, some concepts and some mechanisms are way more complicated than that and cannot be explained only through direct causality, maybe because we don't experience that particular phenomenon firsthand, or in such a strong and direct temporal connection. So some examples are the way medicines work. Of course, we cannot explain how a medicine works and what it does to our body through direct causality. Or also how mobile phones can connect to each other, and all these kind of more complicated phenomenon that we cannot explain through direct causality, but we have to use systemic causality. So we have to make a much wider range of connections and relationship between facts in order to eventually explain something. And so according to the factum and to the framework that they developed, much of the false information that is propagated online is not binary, it's not direct, but rather is systemic. And a clear example of this is related to climate change. So during the last couple of years, former president of the United States, Donald Trump, tweeted and said several times that since the weather is getting colder, then climate change cannot be so bad. Or anyways, he said many times that, oh, in New York it's so cold at the moment, so climate change doesn't exist, it's all fake, and so on. And this is a classic application of direct causality. So we see that the weather is cold, and so there is nothing to worry about, and climate change doesn't exist. Of course, we all know that climate change is a much more complex phenomenon, is a much more complex issue that cannot be explained through this kind of immediate cause and effect connection. And so we see, I think it was really interesting to see why this is kind of an explanation that de facto gave to why people might believe in this when Donald Trump said that climate change doesn't exist, because they tend to use direct causality instead of systemic one. As I said, this is just one of the 4 mechanisms that de facto identified and that we have explored in this article that we jointly published on the SOMA Observatory back in October of 2020. We understand that knowing how these cognitive mechanisms work can help us to clarify why some people believe in fake news, while others tend to interact with it from a more critical standpoint and to question what they are seeing or what they are reading. And also, this mechanism can also help journalists and fact-checkers to create more effective content and to present it to their audience in the most effective way possible. So these are the 3 examples of collaborative investigation that we conducted back in 2020 with the help of the SOMA network, and that I wanted to present. And we saw that they encompass both fact-checking with all the false narratives that we identified across Europe related to the topic of COVID-19 and vaccines. they deal with the real consequence of disinformation, such as in the second investigation about the common threats of anti-lockdown protests, where we saw that people who tend to believe in conspiracy theories took part in the protests in many European countries. And then the last one was a collaboration launched after a SOMA event that led to a joint investigation about the science and the cognitive layers of misinformation. So I think these three investigations kind of well explain all the different things that we did with the SOMA network that are not only fact-checking, but also explore the topic of disinformation from a wider perspective. So this is all for me. I think I've spoken enough, and I leave the floor to my colleague, Carlo.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura, for your presentation. So now we could go with our speakers. I'm Carlo Canepa. I'm a fact checker from Pagella Politica in Milan, Italy. And today we have 4 speakers. I think we could start with Clara. Clara Jiménez Cruz is the CEO and co-founder of Maldita. .es, a Spanish non-profit news organization focused on the control of disinformation and public discourse for fact-checking and data journalism techniques. Maldita develops tech tools that enable citizens to make informed choices and engages with its audience in innovative format. And Clara also collaborates with multiple national media on a daily basis. She was appointed to the high-level group Against Disinformation by the European Commission, the representation of Maldita. And is currently a member of the International Fact-Checking Network Advisory Board. She was selected a Shaka Fellow in 2019 and Best Young Journalist of the Year by the Spanish Press Association in 2020. So, Clara, today we are talking about collaboration between fact-checkers. I think you have a specific topic to talk about with us, so we could go with you, and then we could pass with the other speakers.
Sure. I was listening to the collaboration that SOMA did that Laura was talking about, and it's actually great that the same kind of conclusions were drawn from the collaboration we did among different fact checkers in Europe, being Pagella, AFP, Correctiv, and Full Fact. Together with Maldita, we analyzed which were the hot topics that were coming out during the pandemic. And we probably got to the same conclusions as Laura did. And the other very interesting thing is that afterwards we did this collaboration with Latin American Spanish-speaking countries, and we saw that the same misinformation we were seeing in Europe about a month and a half afterwards reached South America with exactly the same topics, just changing what Laura was saying, basically the names of the cities or the names of the hospitals they were affecting, but they were precisely the same pieces of misinformation and even the same images being shared. There are some interesting things that I think came from the analysis we did that you can look up in covidinfodemiceurope.com. We did a visual analysis, and one of the most interesting things we found is how if you make a timeline of the different pieces of misinformation that appear in each of the countries, they didn't always appear in the same timeline as the coronavirus was advancing. So our first hypothesis was, if you look at the coronavirus map in Europe, you'd say that misinformation would start in Italy, then it will go to Spain, afterwards it will probably go to France, then to Germany, and in the end to the UK. And that didn't happen, actually. The pieces of misinformation were born in each of the countries in a different way. Which to me responds basically and we would need to analyze this more, but it responds basically to different kinds of questions being asked in each of the countries that jump from one to the other at some point. I think that when we talk about collaboration around fact-checking, we don't have a model, which I think it's not very good for us, and we probably should create one. In general, we tend to make collaborations projects that are basically run by one or two organizations, and the rest of the organizations sort of follow, but most of the time are not entirely invested in the projects because we have a lack of resources, because we have a lot of projects going on, because misinformation in each of the European countries is very similar with COVID, but it's very different when it comes to other subjects. And I think that's one of the things we should be looking at when we talk about collaboration among European countries, which is that there are topics we can collaborate on, but there are others we can't that need to be addressed anyhow. I think we've all experienced as European fact checkers that the refugee crisis or the immigration crisis enable us to collaborate because we all see disinformation around those topics, and the disinformation we see is pretty similar to one another. But then we probably have our own national discourses around disinformation that we need to address and that require collaboration among regions, but not so much among the European Union itself. And what I was talking about is that I think we need a model in which we learn to collaborate with one another, that we establish lines that we repeat over and over again as a collaboration system. And I think this has happened to us as European fact checkers in the past with, I don't know if all of you were involved, all of the other fact checkers that are going to talk on this table were involved in Fact Check EU, but I think that was a clear example of a collaboration that didn't really work. And I think it's good that we accept that it didn't work as well as we wanted it to, because we basically need to establish a good model for collaboration. I think that we've seen a broader collaboration with the Coronavirus Fact Alliance within the IFCN that worked very well, but wasn't real collaboration. We were just submitting articles, and then there was a team that was making something out of those articles. But we still haven't found a way, or at least I haven't, and maybe there's someone else on this roundtable that has. I don't think we've found a way in which we can actually collaborate well enough, and I don't think there are enough resources and funding for collaboration among European fact checkers to be happening either. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Clara. After the presentation of the other speakers, I think we could talk together about which pillars could have this model of collaboration with fact checkers. So after the other presentation, we could discuss about that. Now we have the other speaker of this event, who is Alice Echtermann, who studied media, communication and political science in Bremen, Germany, and first worked as a local reporter and online editor at a regional newspaper. She joined the fact-checking team of Correctiv in May 2019 and became deputy team lead in 2020. For her, debunking myths and disinformation and fact-checking are core values of journalism and essential for this democracy. So, Alice, thank you to be here with us. Let's talk about how Correctiv think about collaboration between fact checkers and journalists in general. We can't hear you. I think you need to switch on your mic.
Hello.
Okay.
Sorry. So I'm Alice Echtermann from Correctiv. We are a small non-profit investigative news outlet in Germany, and we have a fact-checking team inside this organization. And I'm the team lead of the fact-checking team since the beginning of 2020. So actually I became this when the pandemic started, and the pandemic pretty much changed everything for us. It's like our work was turned upside down, and also the topic of collaboration with other fact checkers really became an issue last year for us. So before that, I think we never really had so many thoughts about that, and we didn't see the necessity, and maybe we also were too small and didn't consider ourselves capable to manage such corporations, which is, like Clara said, also due to a lack of capacities. So in last year, Clara also said we did this COVID Infodemic Europe cooperation, which I think worked very well and was our first experience like this, like really working together with other fact-checking organizations and really comparing our work and seeing that it is so similar, which is of course only because of the pandemic, but that we can learn so much about how disinformation jumps from one country to another and also jumps from platform to platform, and that we have to keep track of this. And it's really hard because it's such a fast development in most of the time. We also see in Germany that a big share of disinformation is coming from abroad, actually, because I'm now only talking about the COVID infodemic, because this is basically what we were dealing with for the whole last year. We were almost exclusively doing coronavirus fact checks, and we saw that many of them were actually born abroad and then brought to Germany. A very good example, which was also an example of help that we received from other fact checkers, was a claim from Israel very recently. It was about an organization that was called People's Committee. They claimed that due to the vaccinations in Israel, the number of deaths in Israel were rising. And this was actually because of the vaccines and not because of COVID-19. And the tricky thing with this was that in Germany, this committee was framed as the leading health experts in Israel. And many blog articles and websites wrote texts about them and their claims, because they kind of saw these claims as legitimate analysis of the situation in Israel. But in the end, it turned out that these people were just a handful of COVID skeptics, like lawyers or like ordinary doctors, but no virologists or other scientists who were actually doing research in this field. So they were not leading health experts, but they were framed like that in Germany. And the problem is that in Germany, nobody or almost nobody can read Hebrew, and nobody was really able or capable to understand the original report and the background of these people. So, and this was something that we noticed many times, that actually, and we also have we suspect that this was sometimes done deliberately by these groups of coronavirus critics, or critics of the measures that were taken against the coronavirus, that they deliberately take content from abroad that was originally in a different language and maybe also produced by the same skeptic groups in another country. They take it to Germany because they know that in Germany almost no people are capable of really doing research about it and really fact-checking it themselves because of the language problem. And so we had the same problem actually, but we fortunately had this cooperation and are part of the IFCN, the International Fact-Checking Network. We just contacted the fact-checkers from the Whistle in Israel, and they could help us. So, and these kind of investigations happened lots of times last year. And I think this is one of the main examples why fact-checkers are really stronger together. And on an international level, we can debunk claims that jump from one country to another. But this is, of course, only on a daily work basis. It's like, okay, we have this problem. We need to fact check this claim. We need help from other fact checkers in other countries. We need people who are native speakers and maybe already saw this video that was from Brazil. And then they already know who's the woman in the video that's running through a hospital, filming and saying this hospital is empty. So this is just very low-level cooperation, I think. It was very useful last year, but I don't really think it's sufficient because we are still observers in this case. We're just observing, oh, this is jumping from one country to another. This is interesting, but we never really go to the core. We almost never have the time to really investigate where it comes from, or actually how the mechanisms are, why these disinformation can jump from one country to another. Is this just coincidence, or is it done deliberately? Like in some cases, like I said, we suspected that there was some kind of cooperation between COVID skeptic organizations in different countries. For example, we saw that there was this organization in the USA, Children Health Defense by Robert Kennedy Jr. And German skeptics, most of the time when they were talking about vaccines, they referred to this organization too. But we could never really prove that there was a formal cooperation between the two. So we really think cooperation between fact checkers can be useful and should be increased in order to really go to the core and find, in the end, maybe a cure for this kind of spreading of disinformation and not only observe it.
Okay, thank you very much, Alice. So yeah, for now we have, I think, two interesting points. The lack of a model of cooperation between fact checkers and the need to go after observing, disinformation examples to investigating this example in order to understand the mechanism. So after the last two speakers, we could talk about that. And now we have Thanos Siristas, who is a senior editor at Elnika Oxys, one of the biggest debunking websites in Greece. So we're jumping from Germany to Greece, and Elnika Oxys is also a member of the International Fact-Checking Network. So hi, Thanos, or Thanos, I don't know how I need to pronounce your name, Thanos or Thanos.
Thanos is correct.
Okay, Thanos. And so here we talk about your experience about collaboration with fact checker, and then we could go with our last speaker.
Thank you for your kind invitation, and special thanks for all the attendees for being here with us today. The topic of our discussion focuses on cross-border disinformation and how we can all come together and collaborate in order to maximize the impact of our efforts to limit this potentially dangerous threat. The phenomenon of cross-border disinformation, in my opinion, deserves special attention. These manipulations circulate between national, political, and media spheres, get adapted to fit the requirements of local propaganda, and often come back to the country of origin in a more toxic form, inflaming hate speech and discrimination. Disinformation can range from biased half-truths to conspiracy theories, even to outright lies. The intent is to manipulate opinions, creating divisions and blurring the truth among the targeted populations. Governments and individuals can easily spread disinformation at lightning speed using social media platforms to amplify the impact of their message, as well as reach a wider audience that they would be able to even 30 years ago. The Balkans and Greece in particular, given the very interesting geopolitical situation, should be a case study when we talk about cross-border disinformation. However, in a broader European perspective, the challenges are even greater. That is because the EU consists of 27 member states and has a population of roughly 450 million people. The risks and challenges associated with the spreading of inflammatory fake news multiplies if you are communicating in different languages. Even something that would fall in the category of misinformation, which means the unintentional mistake that distorts the truth, can be very dangerous. For example, even a simple press release can end up lost in translation without the right preparation in place. If a poorly adapted story gets picked up by the media, you could end up alienating or misinforming the very people you're trying to reach. Now imagine that situation, how that situation can be amplified inside the EU, which is composed of countries that speak 24 different languages. The language barrier is one problem that can make life difficult for fact checkers. making it one of the most important reasons why we should be able to collaborate with greater ease. Additionally, there are some common issues that plague the information domain of on a European level. One such example, of course, is immigration. As you all know, Greece, along with Italy and Spain, are the main entrance points for refugees and migrants into Europe. This, of course, is a hot button topic, especially for the aforementioned countries, as hate speech and fake news related to this issue are quite common. We've noticed that sometimes claims that first appear in Greece are picked up, distorted, and amplified in other EU countries. Therefore, a direct line of communication between fact-checkers must be established and maintained in order to tackle migration-related fake news as soon as possible. I'd like to mention here that we at Ellinika Hoaxes have worked with other IFCN-certified organizations in several cases of fake news against immigration. One such example was a viral fake claim that appeared in some popular Greek media, stating that Germany would send 50,000 migrants back to Greece. To get to the bottom of this, we contacted our counterparts from Correctiv in Germany, who in turn reached out to the German Ministry of Interior Affairs and provided us with an official statement that the claim was false. By far, though, the most hot button topic of our day and age is the coronavirus pandemic. I believe every fact checker in the world has come across at least one fake claim about COVID-19 that originated from another country. That being the case, cross-border fact checker collaboration is more essential than ever. The sheer amount of misinformation regarding the pandemic overwhelmed many fact-checking organizations. And given the fact that fake claims popped up all over the world and would spread like wildfire in many countries, prompted many organizations to seek closer cooperation with their peers from other countries. Allow me to give you another example. More than a year ago, a claim originating from Italy that the use of face masks was declared unconstitutional went viral in Greece. In order to come up with a fact check, we reached out to our Italian counterparts at Pagella Politica, who provided us with all the necessary information to debunk the claim. So the big question is, are there any solutions to combat cross-border misinformation or disinformation? I would say that there are some promising efforts. One good example of cross-border data sharing is IFCN's Coronavirus Facts Alliance, which unites more than 100 fact-checkers from around the world in publishing, sharing, and translating facts surrounding the new coronavirus. This alliance has brought together fact-checkers from 70 different countries, has given easy access to more than 9,000 fact-checks in 40 different languages. Just like the virus itself, rumors and falsehoods spread across borders, causing what is now called a universal infodemic. The wave of misinformation has cost many lives, making the job of fact-checkers more important and challenging than ever. Lastly, I would like to make a reference to the geopolitical impact of COVID-related disinformation. This is what is called hybrid warfare, which in layman's terms includes the use of propaganda and fake news in order to, among other things, deceive people by disrupting and discrediting Western institutions like NATO and, of course, the EU. In other words, information is often militarized, aiming at undermining the trust in the current political system and its elites. The same applies for COVID-19 disinformation, and one characteristic example are vaccines. According to an EU report published last April, China and Russia are engaging in campaigns to erode trust in the European Union's coronavirus strategy, as well as raise skepticism of Western developed coronavirus vaccines. While China and Russia have increased efforts to promote their own state produced vaccines, they've been using the promotion to undermine trust in Western vaccines in EU institutions. In fact, they do so in many EU countries in multiple languages. Today, we know for a fact that state actors have used this information to target other countries. The narratives are often common. Another example is the so-called moral decay of Europe, which is based on distorted allegations that often gain traction in many EU member states. So make no mistake, such hostile actions demand a centralized and coordinated effort to tackle. Because the narratives are pretty much the same, fact-checkers from different countries could and should collaborate in tackling this sort of disinformation that threatens not only the very fabric of our democratic values, but public health as well. Such collaborations can stop the flow of disinformation, even if it has time to form new iterations with its repetition. Analysts believe that fake news can erode trust in organizations and governments, shift the tenor of an election, helping the formation of fringe political groups, and of course, distort and manipulate information about the COVID-19 pandemic. We have to take for granted that social media have already become a new battleground in domestic and international information operations. The growth of mass communication and social networks offers powerful propaganda and recruiting tools. Facebook, for its part, has established the third-party fact-checking program of which we are partners, and which serves as a way to limit the dissemination of falsehoods in its platform. And by the way, I would like to welcome AFP for joining the fight against fake news in Greece. I won't take any more of your time, and I would like to conclude by saying that the time to act is now. For that reason, initiatives like EDMO that promote cross-border collaboration between fact-checkers must be seriously backed up because they can help disseminate the kind right of information. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tanis, for your presentation. And now we could go with the last speakers of this event. He is Eva Walkenreuter from Austria. She co-founded in 2016 the first Austrian fact-checking project, Fact is Fact, which focuses on Austrian politics. Since then, she worked as an editor at the TV station ProSiebenSat and the organization manager at the NGO Reporters Without Borders Austria. And now she currently works as a fact checker from the news agency Agent from Press AFP. So let's go with Eva, and after that we could have a discussion about the topics that our speaker have talked about. Okay.
Thank you for your introduction, and I can only underline what the others have said so far. I wanted, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just froze as a picture. Yeah, I wanted to compare a little bit my work at Fact is Fact, which is a really small national fact-checking blog, with the work at AFP, with its international team. We already have a kind of collaboration internationally, but of course it's not on.
Okay, we are sorry, we have some technical problems. Eva will come back soon, we hope. So I think we could start with a question from our audience. In the meantime, Jan Egers from CNAC in Belgium, a fact checker, asked us to discuss how model for collaboration could look, and he asked us to start with defining what exactly we need. What is it according to us structurally besides short lines network and the platform to communicate Slack. So I think we could start talking about that while waiting for Eva to come back. So Clara, for you, which are the most important pillars in order to have a model for collaboration between fact checkers all around the world? So if you try to cite a pillar or the most important element, and not which is not funding, okay, we agree that we need more funding, more money, but if you want to say something about that, you say that we lack a model, okay, for collaboration between fact checkers. Which are the most important elements that we need in order to have a model?
So I think that there are two things that I found throughout time that might be useful for this. One is you need to know who you're working with. It's very tentative, and I think we've suffered it a lot throughout the pandemic to try to make a collaboration with people around the world that you might have never met physically. And I know we've been doing this sort of thing a lot because of the situation we're in, but I have the feeling that in the end, you tend to collaborate better and more with the people you've already met in previous occasions and you've built a relationship with. And I think that was the situation for the collaboration we did among the European countries studying COVID misinformation. I know the Pagella team, the Full Fact team, the Correctiv team. I've known them for years and I've been meeting them in conferences for the last 4 years. Plenty of times. So I do think that we're still very social animals, and we need that part of actually knowing and trusting the person we're going to work with in the collaboration. And the other thing that I found very useful after struggling for a lot of time in trying to collaborate with other fact checkers around the world is to design a person that is in charge of the collaborations. Like in our case is Laura Chaparro, and she's the one that handles every collaboration from the editorial point of view, because that's the only way you can actually have someone engaging with that. The problem with the idea of having, it's not even a project manager actually, because she does editorial content, but the problem with that is that works for organizations like Maldita, who are big enough to be able to dedicate one person to handle those collaboration projects. But that's not so easy in many of the fact checkers we see around Europe that have a staff of 5, 4, 6 people that cannot dedicate one person full time to collaboration projects.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Clara. Alice and Tommaso, do you want to add something about this topic? So for you, which are the most important elements in order to have, a prototype of a model of collaboration between fact checkers? Do you agree with Clara? Do you want to add something? I think yes.
Of course, I agree with Clara, and I would like to add a couple of remarks. I think one issue is the language barrier, which prevents us from communicating and sharing information. Another issue is speed. That claims, especially about the coronavirus pandemic, become viral in the blink of an eye. So perhaps we need a tool that can help us monitor these trends and debunk them as soon as possible. I think these are 2 points that should be taken into consideration.
Okay, perfect. Alice, if you had something, and then I think we have Eva back with us. Yes, Eva, could you hear us? Okay, perfect. Sorry, Alice, if you want to answer my questions about the main feature of the model of collaboration between fact checkers, and then we could go back to Eva.
Yeah, I really think both remarks, I really would like to underline both remarks, because we can only cooperate, I think, on a human level if we are all able to know each other and have good channels of communication. And also, I really also see the problem that the fact-checking organizations are very different, and some are kind of big, some are really small. And of course, when you have cooperations, you will have to kind of make sure that this is on eye level, and not only bigger players doing projects, then maybe cooperating with others, but always the same people taking the lead, which is normal, because you always have to have the capacities if you want to take the lead in a project. It has to, fact checkers also have to have support on local level, which is of course a local problem, but when they are too small to put out all the fires in their own country, then of course there's no much time left to cooperate on international level and even taking lead in a project. And the same is also for technical inventions. So if there's innovation and creating a new tool, or maybe finding technical ways to combat misinformation, then of course the expertise usually lies with the bigger organizations, and there kind of is not the same level, and maybe we also have to deal with that and find a way to make corporations equal.
Okay, thank you, Alice. So I think we could come back to Eva. I repeat myself that she is the co-founder of Austrian fact-checking project Fact is Fact, and now she currently works as a fact-checker for AFP. So Eva, if you...
I'm really sorry, but you can hear me now.
Yeah, we could hear you perfectly.
I can only connect you with Alice just said, because I wanted to focus on the differences of work that I experienced at Fact is Fact on the one hand, and this is a really small project, really focuses only on Austrian inner politics. We were 3 people there. In comparison with AFP, it's a big international news agency with nearly 100 fact checkers all over the world, currently 17 countries in Europe. And what we are doing here in terms of cooperation is kind of showing what benefits cross-border cooperation may have. But of course, we would need, as you already said, kind of have a model to balance out the different players, and so that an agency with a lot of resources and a small regional project can cooperate. As an example, when I was working at Fact is Fact, every time, like most of the times that we would do fact checks, they would be focused on Austrian politics, and it would be focused on Austrian debates and on facts shared and discussed in Austria. But sometimes politicians, of course, would grab some context out of the country. For example, we did that in 2018 during the World Championship, the Football World Championship, when a regional state council in Austria claimed that the visa that you get by buying a ticket to the championship allows you to move into Europe, and this way thousands and thousands of Americans, Nigerians, and Algerians will come into Austria and basically invade the country. And this would happen via Finland, but we did not have a lot of resources to read Finnish, to know about the debates that were happening in Finland. So on a base case level, kind of, we had to find someone credible in Finland, and we found a journalist working at the public broadcast YLE. And he helped us do the case and give us background information and not only explains what has happened in Finland, but also to give us more insight about the bigger context happening in Finland, which we would not know. And this is in a big contrast to how this would have happened with work cooperation already before that. What we would do, for example, with a team at the moment, we talk about all the topics each day that all the Europe fact checkers are working on. And this does not only allow us on the one hand to choose and handle more topics, like not only that it's easier to overcome, for example, the language barrier or to tackle contexts and backgrounds we have not the expertise on, but our colleagues have. But on the other hand, and I think this is really a crucial point, it gives us the knowledge about stories that we will have to handle soon. So, for example, I see all my colleagues in the Balkans are talking about morganons, and I'm sure you all heard about these crazy little worms that live in masks and COVID tests. So I can already start preparing because I'm pretty sure that will hit Austria soon, or Germany, German-speaking fake news. And that has been the case a lot. So it's really a useful benefit to, one, you have the capacity to know beforehand, to give you a bit more time to be ahead of the fake news spreader. And secondly, it allows you to draw like a bigger picture, to not say, it popped up because some funny guy in Germany had the idea to stick a magnet to his vaccinated arm. But we can see these videos across dozens of countries, and they follow a certain route, and they did follow the same route the last time we heard about vaccination, about tests, about masks, and it really underlines that it's sometimes not a coincidence, but intentional spreading across border. And I would really emphasize that it really helps equality, because it gives you more time, it gives you more background. And I would really root for everyone having more ideas on how to do that, not only within corporations, but also from one to the next medium. And I would give the floor back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Eva. Okay, now I think we could start our discussion. We have some questions from our audience. I think we could start with these questions, and then if we have some thoughts to share with our audience, we could do. For example, Dimitri Onibene for Università Bicocca in Milan asked us, do you think that making the international interaction between fact-checkers should be made transparent to the public? My answer is yes, but what do you think about that? There are some challenges in making more transparent the collaboration between fact-checkers, or do you think that there aren't any challenges or limitation in order to be transparent on this topic? What do you think about that? Who want to answer to Dimitri? Alice, Eva, Clara, Thanos?
I think that because fact-checking requires that you publish your sources, it is made transparent. So whenever we ask another fact-checker to give us some information or help us look for data, we quote whichever answer they've given us, the same way that we will say, this has already been fact-checked by XYZ fact-checker in this and this way, and that also supports the work we're doing. I think it's even good for us, because it means that it's not only us who got to that conclusion, but that others did too.
Yeah, I agree with you. And for my experience in Pagella Politica, every time we collaborate with Maldita, with Correctiv, with Full Fact, or with other fact-checking collaboration, we always try to be very transparent about the fact that we have collaborated with other fact-checking organizations in order to, improve the quality of our work. Thanos, Eva, and Alice, do you have some thought to share with us on this topic?
Yeah, nothing much to add, but only I think it's it's raising our credibility if we can present also to our readership that we actually ask people on the ground, so to speak, if we are checking something in a country like Israel that many Germans maybe can't really relate to. And sometimes also we get emails of people when we fact check something abroad, then they said, did you go there? Did you actually go there and check? And we always have to say, no, we stayed in Germany, but we asked the fact checkers in Israel. So it's really helpful.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I can only agree, and I don't really see any downsides that it would have to make this process transparent. Like, it only helps us. It makes it more credible. It makes it more defendable, and there's really no downside. And transparency is already something we do, so it would not really change anything in the way we already work.
Okay, thank you. I have one question. Thanos talked about how maximize impact of our work. So, okay, we're talking about collaboration between fact checkers. How do you think we could maximize the impact of our work born from a collaboration between fact checkers? We could use the traditional also channels we use in order to share our content, or do you think that collaboration between international fact-checking organization could give us the opportunity to experiment some new form to share our content? What do you think about that?
Definitely, there are some tools that help in that direction, but there are still many hurdles. I'm sure that new tools will have to be devised at some point in order to make this collaboration more productive. And I'm guessing that digital companies will come up with such tools sometime in the future. Definitely initiatives like EDMO are a step in the right direction. But we have to make use of them. There's no point in in establishing an organization like the EDMO and not making use of it. I think it all has to do with our willingness to participate in such efforts.
Speaking from the experience in Germany, if you do big investigations that are kind of scientific in the field of disinformation, we see that the general public maybe doesn't really have a connection to this topic, especially when they don't really see this is somehow affecting me. We always have to keep in mind that we find it extremely interesting what other fact checkers in other countries do, but maybe the public in our own countries, it doesn't. So they really need, these investigations really need to have a local use to get really big and get a lot of attention in all these countries. The first thing is, of course, they have to be translated in, like all these initiatives and corporations have to be translated in the different languages. You cannot ask people to read everything in English, even if most people are able to understand English. But it has to be in the local language, and it has to be kind of localized to really let people feel that this is important and that it has an impact on their lives, and it is really something that the local politics should act upon. I don't really have an idea how you can do it in the first place, but I just know from my experience that if you want to have a bigger impact, the different countries are still like in this my country, my interest box. And so you have to deal with that too.
If I may add to that, I think science communication to the general public is a very neglected sector when it comes to fact-checking. I think more research needs to be done in that field. fact checkers, obviously, most of them are not scientists. They can't read, reports in scientific journals and understand what they're reading about. So journalists and fact checkers should at least get some basic training when it comes to communicating science to the general public.
Okay, Eva, do you want to add something? I see that you have unmuted your microphone. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes we maybe should broaden our definition of cooperation not only within fact check, but to other stakeholders if we want to maximize the impact our work has. Because sometimes we are already seen as the evil censors or the mainstream media or something like that. But people trust people on the ground a bit more. So if we do a fact check on climate change and some local initiative is dealing with climate change, if they pass on our fact checking work, sometimes it really helps to broaden the effect. So cooperation should maybe not only, but also include other stakeholders other than other fact checkers.
Okay, thank you. Now we have another question from Rajat Kawas, founder CEO of FGF Skills. The question is, are there ways to ensure legal course once we have identified the source of disinformation? I think the answer depends on the countries, but I want to connect this question to an interesting topic that Alice have raised during her presentation, which is that now we are focusing on observing, the disinformation phenomenon between countries, and we need to have a step forward in order to understand the mechanism behind the disinformation phenomenon between borders. I want to ask you if you have identified some mechanism, some connection between, for example, Alice talked about vaccine skeptics, or do you think that this spreading of disinformation between countries are more caused by, for example, coincidence and not cooperation between fake news spreaders? So what do you think about that, Alice?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I don't really have an answer to that because I wish I had. It's that in sometimes you see these kind of chain messages on WhatsApp that are you can really see that they were translated from one language to another, also sometimes very badly translated with Google Translate or something, and then I can make up a scenario where maybe a person that was on holiday somewhere or has relatives in another country got this message sent from them. Maybe I have an aunt or an uncle in Spain, and then he sends me this WhatsApp message, and then I say, oh, this is the German audience has to know this. Then I translate it and I spread it onto my contacts. I can make up these scenarios, but I don't really know, and that's the main problem. Also with the cooperation that we see between these organizations that have sprung up during the pandemic, they were all kind of the same. They were against vaccines, they're against, they believe the pandemic's not dangerous or maybe doesn't even exist. And then they think the lockdown measures and all these things governments did are useless or dangerous or a way to establish dictatorship. So if you have these organizations in different countries and you see that they're kind of cooperating, it would be really useful to go deeper into that, because there you definitely have a intentional cooperation. But yeah, we never, it's kind of frustrating that we never before did something like that and never really saw how they act. Just suspect that they have maybe also a Slack channel to exchange, but we don't really know.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if Clara or Tommaso or Eva want to add something. Do you see some cooperation, or it's more coincidence and how social network work? I don't know.
This is the eternal question that fact checkers get asked. Like, where's the origin? Who made it up? How it went from one country to another? And trust me, we've done the research, all of us here. It's not so simple. It's not. Maybe most probably other kind of reporters would be able to suggest or point out that maybe this came up from here. Fact checkers would not, because we don't have the proof to show you, and therefore we're not even gonna dare to suggest it. I do think that there are, like, one of the things we've seen, and I'd love to do more research about this with the rest of the fact-checking community, for example, is how misinformation sites around migration issues in Spain quote and copy information from misinformation sites in other countries. So they'd say that according to this website in Sweden, this thing around migrants raping a girl has happened. Then when you go to the website in Sweden, the website is totally made up. If you ask the Swedish fact checkers, they'll tell you this doesn't make any sense. This didn't happen, and these guys publish misinformation on a daily basis. Those kinds of connections, we have seen them. We have also seen, again, around migration, similar actors in different countries belonging to a part of the ideological spectrum and very active on social media, post the same pieces of misinformation in different languages at the same time or throughout the same day. Those kinds of attitudes suggest that there is a connection and that there is an organization behind it. Have we been on that Twitter group, WhatsApp group, Signal group? No, we haven't. But there's clearly something going on there, and I'm sure it could benefit from more collaboration among fact checkers to be able to trace the map of how that bad guys collaboration is going on.
Yeah. Thanos, do you want to add something? No, Eva? We could go with, if you want to add something, or with...
Yes. I think it's a complicated issue. On one hand, you have misinformation. For instance, someone sees something in Italian, Google translates it and makes it viral in Greece. Obviously, they don't do it in order to gain something other than attention. On the other hand, you have disinformation. There are those who will pick up news from questionable websites from abroad and reproduce them in their websites in order to get more clicks. Also, and perhaps more importantly, there are state actors that deliberately disseminate disinformation, especially for the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's a very complicated issue that requires, to factor in many elements in order to get to the bottom of the origin of each fake news, wherever it comes from.
Okay, we could go through to another question from Miko Salo, who is a founder and member of Facta Bari. He asked us, what can EDMO learn from Coronavirus Fact Alliance, and what can fact checkers learn from researchers and literacy specialists, for example, educators? I don't know, Tommaso, do you want to answer this question? And maybe other speakers could add us their opinions. So, Tom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hi, everybody. I am Tommaso Canetta. I made the introduction for those who are connected after. I am the deputy director of Pagella Politica, and I follow the EDMO project. So, yeah, I think that we actually can learn a lot from the previous experiences, as Miko said. And I think that EDMO will treasure those lessons that we learned in the past. For example, first I heard Clara asking about having maybe a smaller network, but more closer among persons that actually know each other. And this is our goal in EDMO. We are actually trying to build a small network of only fact-checking organizations, well-respected and reliable fact-checking organization, with just one person responsible for the EDMO project. So actually we can make, team building meeting and webinar, and we can actually, get to know each other better. And this can help also about the speed problem that Thanos raised. So I think that in EDMO we can actually do better thanks to the lesson we learned from the past. And about the cooperation with, for example, media literacy experts, I think that once that we have inside EDMO this network of only fact-checking organization, this unit can cooperate with other parts of the EDMO project. For example, of course, the media literacy experts, to try to understand how we can have a stronger impact. For example, bringing our works in school. I don't know, this is just an idea on top of my head. And of course, we can also cooperate with bigger actors than us, such as media company or online platforms, so that we can, scale up our impact and maybe have access also to tools that can allow us to detect better the sources of disinformation. That is the problem that Alice raised. So I think that as the speakers perfectly pointed out, we saw recurring problems in the last years. And I really believe that EDMO can have the means to tackle most of them. And of course, it will depend a lot on us, on how we will exploit this opportunity. But yeah, I think that having, a closer, smaller, but closer units of fact-checking organizations that can cooperate with bigger actors, we are in best position to do so.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if Alice, Clara, or Thanos and Eva want to add something about the Coronavirus Fact Alliance, which have work and what didn't work. Do you have something to add about this topic? Or we could go to the last question. Alice?
Yeah, maybe it's kind of a good example of what I said. It's this whole database it could be incredibly useful also for the public, but as far as I know, in the public in Germany didn't use it. Like we sometimes promoted it. There's also this WhatsApp chatbot connected to the database, but it's in English and in Spanish, and that's maybe the reason. I don't really know. It could also be that not enough people know Correctiv and didn't realize that there's something so useful that they could actually have in the coronavirus pandemic. But this never really spread in Germany. So this is maybe the crucial point. There's something very useful. There's a huge database with fact checks worldwide, but in Germany, people don't use it.
Okay, thank you. So we could go with the last question from Stefania Libri from IBM Business Analytics. She asked us, local media are key to give more visibility and to reinforce the fact-checking outcome and make it more visible. So the question is, what do you think about collaboration between not only fact-checkers, but also with local media news outlets? Or do you want to share your experience about that? Alice, you're saying yes with the ad. I don't know if you want to share with that.
So we as a fact-checking team don't cooperate with local media so far, but Correctiv does. As I said, Correctiv is a bigger organization. It's not only fact-checking. And we have something that's actually called Correctiv Local. And we are, since some months a week, trying to figure out how we can use the network. It's kind of a network of local newspapers and media that are connected to Correctiv, and this is maybe like the SOMA network. You can imagine it's like they can work together, and there's also, if Correctiv does maybe a bigger data investigation, they search for context in the network and offer the investigation to these smaller media, because many don't have a capacity, for example, to have a data journalist and to analyze data. And so we know that this is a big treasure that we're sitting on. We just never used it for the fact checking so far, but we would really like to, because we think, and if it only starts with spreading knowledge about how to debunk something, how to have good investigation tools, and journalistic skills, because I come from a local newspaper originally, and I know that many people there do this very classic journalism, which is nothing against classic journalism, which is only what I'm trying to say is that they never really heard about reverse image search, for example, or they don't use these techniques to verify something. It's more like, okay, I have a problem, I call the press spokesperson of this organization and I ask him, and that's all they do. So we could do workshops and all that kind of stuff. We are not there, but we know that it would be a very good thing to do.
Okay, now we have a very, very last question. Sorry, again from Dimitri Ognibene from University of Bicocca. He asked us, sorry for the additional question. How would you compare having an easier interaction between your local IT systems versus having government support, for example, police office for international interaction between local fact-checking agencies, helping with translation and dissemination? What do you think about that? Someone want to answer to these questions? Nobody? Tommaso, do you have, or Giovanni? I don't know.
Yeah, I can try to answer that. Actually, I think that probably it's better for us also, for our independence and tertiarity to not be seen also by the public opinion as related to governmental support. So probably I'm rooting for local IT systems, but this is just, on top of my head opinion. I'm open to discussion.
Okay, so thank you all. I think we could go with the conclusion with my boss, my director Giovanni Zanni, who is the director of Pagella Politica, and thank you all, and I'll give the microphone to Giovanni for the conclusion of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. Sorry for looking like Bane in Batman, but I'm at the office. There are some people here, so I have to keep my mask on, and that also fits well with the presentation that Carlo made of me. So the boss. I just wanted to add a couple of things on the that came to my mind following the very interesting discussion we had this morning and the presentation of the work that was done in SOMA. So I was thinking while I was listening that there are actually two main approaches to disinformation. And the first one is the checking of false information itself. So to say, the daily work that we do as fact checkers, where we look at flagged content by the users or by content that we saw on the internet, and then we, as fact checkers and debunkers, basically we through our work in verifying it, we arrive at verdicts and at material and the editorial content that basically responds to those single pieces of content that deal with disinformation. And this is in some senses what fact checkers are known for and famous for. But I think there is also another approach to disinformation, which is equally crucial. And that is the reflection, the more journalistical, analytical work on the disinformation phenomenon itself. So an activity of, for example, producing reports or analysis of what is going around disinformation in both in our countries and in Europe more generally. And this is something that actually I feel that fact checkers don't have a lot of voice in. meaning that we usually live this kind of approach to disinformation to researchers or think tanks or other I don't know, other people that deal with this information in a different way and from different perspective than us. But I think that this is quite strange because actually we are kind of the front line in this work, meaning that we are probably, as fact checkers, the first ones to see, for example, if someone has gone viral on WhatsApp or a fake image is circulating online, that kind of stuff. And so we are the front line in that battle, so to say, if we want to use this metaphor. And we have also access to a lot of raw data about disinformation, mainly in our countries. But for some reason, we, generally speaking, as fact checkers, we don't have a lot to say when it comes to analyzing trends and presenting what's similar from country to country. This is really strange, and I think that what came and what was behind the discussion that we had this morning is also the need to have more say in this second field, in this field of not only debunking disinformation, but also talking about disinformation and treating disinformation as an issue that should be discussed at a general level in the public, both in our countries and in Europe at large. So I think that this thing that I was thinking about, plus a lot of the things that were said by our speakers, actually mingle together very well, because it came, for example, from this morning, the necessity for a model for cooperation that can be effective and also time-wise able to answer quickly to the various trends of disinformation that come up in Europe and in our countries. Well, while I was thinking about that, and I was listening to you pointing out to those needs, and in some sense, I thought that we could have a solution in the sense that this is one of the main aims of the EDMO project. So EDMO aims to build a network of fact-checking organizations that is able to put into a network all these fact-checking projects that are, as of today, are working around Europe. Now, the point, of course, is here is to find out a good way of cooperating together in an effective way that doesn't takes too much of your time. And this, from a practical level, we will probably try to do that by starting to build, first of all, a monthly report on disinformation in Europe, made together with the association and the projects that will come to be part of EDMO. And the point here is that through that should be quite simple in terms of time and resources that you have to put in this, but also at the same time will enable fact checkers to use and in some sense leverage on that big amount of raw data that we actually, as of today, don't use very much, and trying to move and make a first step toward that second approach that I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is trying to move from simply reacting to disinformation to also being a voice in the common debate about what disinformation is at the European level, what's out there, what we see from the front lines, again, with the metaphor that, with this kind of battle metaphor that is very often used when we talk about disinformation. So this is something that we will try to do, and I hope that also the audience of this panel will see very soon the first results of this effort. I won't take more of your time, and I will just conclude by saying that I want to thank you, all the speakers that contributed today, and also thank the technical assistance by the European University Institute. And finally, thank you to all my colleagues, Carlo, Laura, Silvia, who's behind the scenes, but made a lot to organize this event, and Tommaso for the great work in organizing and moderating this event. So thank you all again. Thank you to the audience, and we hope that this can really be a first step toward some really kind of practical outcome that can make fact checkers a bigger and stronger voice in the debate around disinformation in Europe. Thank you, and have a great day.